What's up, everybody? We are here with some PGA DFS picks, lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel, best bets for the PGA Championship down at Valhalla. If you are new here, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, glad to see you back. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, and I am joined, like I always am during these major weeks, by Niromada, our golf writer at OccupyFantasy.com. Niro, what's up, man? How you doing? Happy major week.
I'm good, Brian. How are you? Yeah, always a little extra bounce in the step when it's a major week. So this will be the second one, two more after this, and then it wraps up so fast, and then you got to wait till the Masters.
I know it's a long wait in between, but it does fly by during the summer. So, what we're going to do here in this video, lay it out for you right now. We're going to talk about the golf course really briefly. Don't want to get into the granular things, but just what's important and how we think it impacts this event from a betting and DFS perspective. We will discuss this 10K range. You see it on screen here from Cantlay all the way up to Scotty Scheffler, how we feel about these players for our DFS lineups, and maybe some information you can use in your outright bets. We'll talk about the trifecta plays. If you're new here, don't worry, you'll find out what those are. Returning members, you know what the trifecta plays are. Betting market analysis, guys whose odds have moved at all the sports books that we track. We'll talk about lineup construction tips. It is especially important during major weeks and during these weeks where we have super large contests like the Millionaire Makers. And then we'll discuss our favorite live guys, our favorite European players. There are quite a few in this event, and our favorite lower owned plays that can help you win that $1 million top prize on DraftKings. So you want to stick around until the very end. So Nira, Valhalla. Now, if you read on Twitter, you watch any videos, listen to any podcasts, you've probably heard most golf diehards address their distaste for this golf course as a major venue. And we're not going to get into all the details about that. I'm not at that level yet, but here's the thing. What I want to know from you is at least what we've put into our model at OccupyFantasy.com that ranks golfers on all the metrics that we look at. It seems like there isn't a ton of strategy at this course, which is not something you want to see from a major. It seems like the shots are out in front of you. The distances are pretty consistent on most holes, which ends up being an execution test rather than an all around skill test like we normally see at majors. Do you see Valhalla as that type of course? And if so, what does that mean for DFS?
Yeah, I think it's definitely that kind of course. So 7,600 yards. It's long. It's beefy. It's it is the it is not a course that demands strategic excellence or a large amount of thought process around how am I going to miss in this particular spot and not be in this particular area. Certainly, there are areas like that around the course. Water's in play on 7 holes, so I mean the obvious things are things you still want to miss. I don't think it helps somebody like a Scheffler or a Spieth or a Patrick Reed or somebody who is renowned or known for their strategic ability around the golf course or to play in a very strategic or very smart kind of way. It doesn't mean that Scheffler can't win. He's obviously the most likely winner of this event, regardless. But yeah, I don't think it is made for that. It's really made for someone who it's a straight high ball off the tee, long irons. The course forces forces all players, kind of no matter how far you hit it, into hitting a number of longer approaches into the greens. And yes, some of those approaches will be a little bit different, but it's really kind of that same shot over and over, the long, straight, high ball. Who can hit that the most and the most consistently is going to be the people that are there at the end of the day on Sunday.
To me, that sounds like a ball striking robot, which you could certainly describe Scheffler as that, but also describe some other guys that you've labeled in that bucket in the past on these shows, which we will talk about here in a second. My other question regarding the course, now this is more of a betting question. When you and I sat down here for the Masters, we told people, listen, we're going to talk for 40 minutes on this show, all the different guys in the contest, who you could possibly bet and play in DFS. But we said ultimately, if you just have one ticket and you're probably smarter than we are, just bet Scotty Scheffler 4 or 5 to 1, 10 units, cash your ticket, and have a great Masters. Now, based on what we just talked about, is that a viable strategy here? And more importantly, is this a rare major where we can go further down the odds boards where we may get an upset winner or we may be able to deviate from the typical major strategy of just sticking to the top 10, top 20 in odds?
Yeah, it's good. It's a very good question. We'll start by saying that Scheffler and McIlroy are clearly the two most likely players to win this event. I'm not going to dissuade anybody's thinking there. That's just simply the fact. They are the two most likely players to win this. So if you are massively risk averse, then sure, you could go in that direction. But there's a couple things that make this different than something like the Masters. Number one, the field is much bigger and much deeper here than it is at the Masters. Number two, the Masters, same course every year. Augusta National is full of nuance and areas where it really pays to have experience and understand how the ball reacts to the wind and the ground and the different course conditions and all that kind of stuff. The PGA is obviously not that kind of event. It rotates courses, every single year. And this is the type of course that I think allows for someone who, might not be as good as a Scheffler or a McIlroy to creep their way towards the top of the leaderboard, mostly because it asks a very similar question over and over and over again throughout the entirety of the 18 holes. And the more narrow that band is, the more it allows someone to sneak through. Now, by the way, I still, when you come down Sunday morning, or Sunday afternoon, sorry, there's not going to be a ton of those again, random to everyone except for me, type of players that are around the top 10 or the top 20, but I definitely expect there to be a few. And I didn't think there would be many of those at the Masters, and I don't think we really saw very many of those at the Masters.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you see on screen here for the viewers are the sections from our daily plug. This is the article that Niromada writes every single week at OccupyFantasy.com. The betting odds, weather, course breakdowns, and key metrics. Those are all above the paywall, so you can go check that out for free. You saw it on screen here. You want his picks and strategies that is behind the paywall, and you can go check that out if you want more information. Now, let's talk about this 10K range, Nero, and I'm gonna pull up the DraftKings odds, the DraftKings lineup screen here one more time. So Scheffler all the way down to Cantlay, and what I'll do here, for those of you who watch our MMA shows, we sometimes we have segments where we just pull out a fighter's name and we give a quick sentence about our expectations. I want to do that same type of game here, Nero, with this 10 to 13K range, and maybe you can hit on their ownership, how they fit the course, price, etc. Right? So I'll just name the guy. You give me your thoughts on him. Let's start with the very top, Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah, Scheffler and Rory, just group them together. They're the two most likely winners. They both won their last starts. They both are coming off major life events. Scheffler, the birth of his son. Rory just filed for divorce on Monday.
Really,
So
really, really
like
quickly,
they're
you believe that to be a positive in the grand, as much as we can label a divorce as a positive for on course.
sure. I'll say it this way. So golf is a very mental game. It's the most mental of the major sports in the U.S. anyway. And anything that frees up a golfer mentally is a positive thing. The births of children tend to be positives for golfers because sometimes it gives them a renewed sense of purpose. Sometimes it just frees them up because now they know what they have. They have a boy or a girl or a baby. They're settled into a new situation, into a new routine. I mean, as I said to someone, Rory clearly knew that the divorce papers were getting filed on Monday morning in court, and that it was going to become a major news story. And what did he do that weekend? He won. So I just think that's why I always usually regard big life changes, caddy changes, that kind of thing as short term, not long term, but short term positives for players who go through those changes.
Fair enough. That's a very good explanation. And just to hit back on Scheffler, we talked about him a lot. $13,200, extremely expensive, near the top of the highest priced golfer we've ever seen. Now, we do have a 5K range here, and we'll talk about this more in the lineup construction section. But for a deep as field as this is, if you are playing Scheffler as you normally would, do you think that the price tag is prohibitive, or can you make it work?
You can Definitely make it work. I've made it work on a few builds that so far that I like and that I think are absolutely viable. However, there is a higher, in the normal events that Scotty has won, if you want to win a sizable GPP, he has to be on your lineup. In this particular case, Scotty could 100% win the PGA, not be on the winning GPP lineup. Now, again, unless he wins in a runaway
Sure.
and he wins by like 8 or 10 shots and he just dominates the fantasy scoring, in that case, yes, you're going to have him and it's not going to matter at all. But there are plenty of viable scenarios where he wins, and a number of the 9K and low 10K players are the next group of players in the top five, the top six, the top seven. In that case, a lineup with three of those players, or at least two, maybe two and a half of those players, we'll say, can easily outscore a lineup that where Scheffler was your best, and then you had a number of other players just in the top 10, but you couldn't fit in all those guys in the top five because they were too expensive to fit with Scheffler.
And just to back that up, we have seen that play out in previous majors where the most expensive golfer
Yes.
has won the event, but even the winning $25 or $10 millionaire winning lineups did not include that golfer because of the pricing restrictions. So just something to keep in mind. All right, let's keep this brief. Let's move on. And again, a sentence or two per player. John Rahm, back from Live,
Yeah,
disappointing at the Masters. We have him at 5% projected ownership, Nero.
yeah, which is bananas when you think about it. So I think the thing is, it's really hard to click Rom's name when you can pay a couple $100 more and grab Rory. Rory on paper, I mean, clearly a safer, better selection. Or you could save a couple $100 and go down and grab Xander, by the way, who just finished second place for Rory last week, and his form is better than Rom's. But that as if we've played DFS long enough, we know that simply makes Rom like possibly the best tournament play on the board this week for DFS. Not for betting, not for picking in your pool with your buddies or anything like that, but strictly for DFS tournament purposes. John Rahm is probably the best play on the board.
Absolutely. And speaking of Xander, you mentioned him. We talked about him. You're not in his corner, obviously, but how do you feel like him once again not closing the show on Sunday at the Wells Fargo will impact him for this tournament?
I don't think that helps. I feel like it's just another tick in the checklist of like another time that he didn't get it done. He's going to need to get it done one of these times for him to, I think, to kind of change that narrative and that belief. That being said, he's playing outstanding golf right now. He's an all-around player. It's a good course fit for him. He should go well. But again, at his price, you're really going to want him to finish top three, top two, win it. So I will have some Xander. I don't know that I'll have as much as the field.
Just here's the thing: just wait until round four showdown, and if he's not in the top three, just lock him into all your lineups when he shoots 8 under.
100%. That's the perfect time to play him, and my guess is that's how he's going to win his first major, from somewhere off the pace where he's not dealing with it and he just can freewheel it and go get it.
All right, next, Brooks Koepka, perhaps the best major player we've seen, at least in my lifetime. And you hear the narrative about you have to play well before the PGA Championship. Well, guess what? Brooks got back in the lab, won at Live Singapore. Is it too obvious? Is how great of a play is Koepka? It's never going to be a numbers play with Brooks at majors.
Yeah, never. It's all subjective stuff. Yeah, I think Kepka he's a very good play. I happen to prefer the player we're going to talk about next, but I have no arguments from Kepka. I will have plenty of Kepka exposure. He makes a ton of sense this week for plenty of reasons. Course fit, just who he is. How he was playing in his previous two starts before this one, which he played much better in these starts than he did in the starts before the Masters, and that's usually a indicator with him. So yeah, I think he's a very good play.
And I will say, for those who have been longtime members of OccupyFantasy.com, use the PGA model. Typically, Brooks hasn't ranked that highly, but he does rank in the top 10, I believe even the top 5 this week. That uses Live Golf data, and it shows his course fit here. So just another check in the box for Brooks Koepka. Next is the official ball striking robot, Ludwig Oberg. Now, did withdraw recently with that knee injury. He said in his press conference it is not an issue, but he is playing with a brace. I assume you feel he's okay enough if he's teeing it up here and does fit the test to a T.
Yeah, you definitely a little bit added risk, but I think that adds to the reason why I like him is because we're getting a slight ownership discount to compensate for that potential injury risk. I assume he's fine. I do think people hearing that he's wearing a brace as a precaution will make maybe a few more people get off of him, and that's fine. I just can't think of a player who's a better fit for this golf course than Ludwig. And I just happen to believe that he's not too far below Scheffler, even though he's so young and he's so relatively inexperienced. He just his body of work so far that he's put forth in his first 6 months of PGA Tour starts, when you compare it to other players, like fits in with the all timers. So yes, it's early, but I'd rather be early with him than late. So I think this is a good chance to get on him at a slightly lesser piece of ownership.
Be early than late, as always is the case. Next, we have Colin Morikawa and Patrick Cantlay to round out the 10K range. Two guys who have had some ups and downs. Thoughts on Colin, thoughts on Cantlay, how they fit the course, and where they fit into the DFS landscape.
Yeah, Morikawa's he's a great course fit. He's been playing better of late. I will definitely have a good exposure to Colin. 16th and 23rd in his last two starts, and then before that he was ninth at the Heritage and third at the Masters. So I think he's just fine. Like, his form's good. He's a ball striking machine. Should be a good fit for him. He's long enough. Prefer him to be a little bit longer, but I think he's long enough here. Cantlay would be similar to Rom. Like, he's probably going to be very low ownership. But man, he just is tough to. He's actually tough to click his name because of how he's been playing lately, and did not look good last week. Did play better on Sunday. He's third at the Heritage, but he only has two top tens uh, throughout all of 2024. And that just doesn't sound like Patrick Cantlay. So I'm not saying that he's, amazingly far off, but he doesn't seem like he's in the best form or in the best space right now. So I will have maybe a small smattering of Cantlay, maybe, but if you have 5 or 6%, you're probably matching the field, which is wild but true. So I think that's probably where I net out with him.
Very true. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the betting markets here and how these golfers' odds to win have moved since we started tracking them Monday morning. First, though, let you know that this show is sponsored by, of course, OccupyFantasy.com, where you can get all the PGA tools and content that we reference throughout the show. But it's also sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. You've been watching our shows, if you've been online really at all, you've heard about Underdog Fantasy. And now's the time to take a swing at Pick'em on Underdog during this week, this golf major. Underdog has the biggest offerings in the game to make your picks from. So download the Underdog Fantasy app and sign up today. If you haven't signed up yet, you're tired of hearing about us talking about Underdog Fantasy, well, you wait until the right time, because new customers this week will receive not only a player special in Pick'em, they will also receive a never been seen at Underdog Fantasy deposit match. Throughout the past year or so, we've been talking about the $100 deposit match bonus when you use promo code Occupy. That has been bumped to $250 for this week. So if you haven't signed up for Underdog Fantasy, you live in an eligible state, you want to play their pick'em games or their draft contests, you can use our tools at OccupyFantasy.com and get a deposit match bonus up to $250. All you have to do is sign up, use promo code Occupy, and start playing today. So, Nero, let's go back to these betting markets. Trifecta plays, how we describe them. We look at and track the odds to win at 3 or 4 sharp sports books that are known to take action from sharp bettors for golf specifically. And if a golfer's odds to win have moved in the right direction at all of the sports books, we call that a trifecta play. These guys historically have had fantastic results, both in DFS and obviously in the betting markets too. So we have 6 trifecta plays as of Wednesday afternoon, which is a pretty good number, a pretty healthy number at this time of the week. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to name the trifecta play. You give me a sentence on why you think they have been hit in the betting market. So let's start here. And number one is Siwoo Kim, who we have at 12% projected ownership right now.
Yeah, I've seen some sharp money on Siwoo in the top Asian markets. I do my own value rank that uses way different methodology than the model, and Siwoo comes in as 11th ranked in the field for best values for me. So uh, he makes a lot of sense. Good course fit from a ball striking perspective. So I get it.
Denny McCarthy, 14%, who I 14% projected ownership, who I might not have expected to be on this list, but why do you think he's being bet up?
Well, again, if I'm gonna tout my own stuff, my combined value rank, McCarthy is number one in that chart. Now, DFS, I'm more wary because I don't like players that are 14% owned at
Yes.
$6,300. But simply, I think McCarthy is strictly they just released him as odds were too high. I think he opened around 190 to 1 or something. That's just simply too high for someone of his caliber. The holdback with McCarthy DFS, his ownership and his course fit. He gets it done a little bit more with his short game than he does with his long game. But if he has a good enough week with his long game, very dangerous for someone priced that cheap.
So the first two guys, the common denominator is they rank highly in Niromada's personal rankings, which means it's just Niromada that's actually moving the betting market. So next we do have Xander, 15%. So the rare 10K plus guy who is getting the move. So maybe some reason to load up on Xander even more there. Maybe he can get over the Wells Fargo. At least the betting markets are saying that.
Yeah, first of all, it couldn't be further from the truth that it's me moving any number anywhere. Second of all, yeah, I think we've said all the stuff we need to say about Schauffele. Like he's in great form, he's playing very well. The course last week at the Wells Fargo is a very similar course to Valhalla this week. So if he can shake it off and get over that Sunday disappointment, maybe if that galvanizes him, focuses him even more, could be a great play this week.
All right, next we have Keith Mitchell, $6,600. We have him at 12% projected ownership.
Yeah, Mitchell. I've also seen some of that money come in. He's got great ball striking stats for the year. I think he's in the top 10 in many of the ball striking stats, and he's got a number of top 25 finishes this season. So, what was it, a couple of weeks ago at Valspar, maybe a month ago, where, I mean, he had a two-stroke lead going into the final day. So, clearly not very far away from tournament winning form, not just good form. So that also makes a lot of sense. By the way, I think in DFS he's going to be pretty low owned, so could be a good tournament play there.
Now, on the other end, we have Benny On, who is $7,800. You wrote him up in the daily plug. He is a top 10 play in our model despite his price tag. Betting markets certainly agree. Everything is lining up for Benny On this week. You look at the approach distances that most players will be hitting into the green from. Benny On is top five, really. And depending on which time frame that you use, the biggest problem here, Nero, is that we have him projected nearly 20% owned, and playing 20% owned, $7,800 guys generally is not the way to win in PGA DFS.
It certainly is not. When I wrote him up, he wasn't projected for that high of ownership. So, but I don't love to hear that. If we remove the ownership stuff in a vacuum, he's a great fit. He's in very good form. He's a long iron hitting robot. He's like the prototypical type of guy that you would want for this kind of event. But I definitely think that projected from a tournament perspective, again from GPPs and stuff, is a definite makes me a little queasy. But for smaller contests, cash games and that kind of thing, I think you just lock Ben on in there and throw the key away.
Yeah, probably doing it wrong if you're playing a cash game, a low risk 50-50 double up without Ben on in your lineup this week.
Yep.
And finally, we have Kurt Kitayama, noted long ball hitter. He is just the only guy on this list, less than 10% projected ownership right now. We have him at 6%. Kurt Kitayama, how does he fit this course?
Yeah, good fit. I mean, he's long. He plays difficult courses well, so I assume that's why he's getting the love. He's not in the best of form, but he's not like missing any cuts either. As I was just scanning back through his list, like his last six starts have all been top 35 finishes. Now, almost every single one of them has been in the 30s. So there's a 23rd and a 19th in there. But like it shows you that he's not too far away, but he's definitely not threatening the top of the board. I'm guessing the logic here is very good course fit. He's playing well enough. Get him into this tournament. He gets it off to a good start, and look out then because he's someone who's not afraid once he gets in the mix to stay with it the whole way through.
Very good points, and be sure to monitor this throughout the rest of the evening. If you're watching this Wednesday night or middle of the night Thursday, we will post a final trifecta play update in our Discord server, occupyfantasy.com/discord. That link is in the description below. You want that final betting market information if you're making lineups for this event. All right, before we close out the show, we will talk about final lineup construction tips for DraftKings, favorite live guys, favorite Euro guys, favorite low owned plays, and we'll keep it brief here towards the end. And we kind of talked about a little bit the Scheffler factor, the pricing range, ownership. Now, we do have a bunch of PGA professionals. We have some older guys in here who basically have no chance. So that's, 5,200 and below. But we do have some realistic players in the 5K range that we can use here. And I guess, are there any final thoughts on salary usage, like how you break up the players, which salary tiers are going into your tournament lineups? And let's just keep the biggest $25 GPP in mind, since that's what most people are playing. And two, because we have 150 golfers to choose from, there is no shortage of lower owned players under 5%. I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nero, I would think that you almost have to have multiples, at least sub 10%, but probably sub 5% guys in this biggest GPP. Not only is that optimal, but it's easy enough to do.
Yeah, in the big $25 one, I really think you need to push yourself to get to 5% or below. And again, you can fudge it a little bit. Maybe it ends up being 6% or something like that. But I think you want to really push yourself to try to get two of those low-owned players. Now, an alternative method would be, again, this is more ownership focused than salary focused, but you know, force the builder or force yourself to give you three above 10% and three below 10%, where only one of your 10 percenters is a 5% or below, but only one of your above 10% is above 15%. So that keeps you in a very tight middle range of ownership, and can be a very highly leveraged build. And the difference in a week like this is when you try to do that kind of building in a regular PGA event week, you you end up with a number of questionable players in that type of lineup construction. On a week like this, you can get six guys who are, as I like to say in the plug, very good at golf, as I put it in quotes, and meet that ownership criteria. So you have a very low combined ownership total for that lineup, and you only have one player above 15%. Yeah, you only have the one below 5%, but you have four other guys right in that middle range, and it's a very highly leveraged setup. So I think there is definitely a case where you can do that type of build, or a case where you can do a hyper balanced salary build, where you basically have six players in almost the 8K range, maybe a little bit in the low nines, maybe a little bit in the high sevens, but you're just pounding that middle area. But I think my two favorite builds are just your standard one, where you're forcing yourself to get two of those 5% or below players in there, or that alternative like heavy middle ownership build, where you're really focused on those guys between 5 and 15% for the majority of your lineup spots.
And both strategies have tons of merit this week for reasons we've talked about already. One is how this course is playing out and how we could expect to be more wide open than a typical major. That would lend itself more towards these balanced builds moving to the top of contest leaderboards. And two, finding easily great golfers at 5% or less. We already talked about John Rahm, one of the best golfers in the world. If we fast forward from a year ago and said John Rahm will be 5% at a major, you would think we're crazy. Yet we can get that here with John Rahm at 5%. And that counts as one of your 5% plays for a $1 million to the top contest. So very easy to build lineups this week without getting too chalky. Now, Nero, I'll name these final buckets of guys. You just give me one or two guys that comes to the top of your mind in terms of guys that you think fit the mold here. So live, lots of live guys in the field. I believe 13 golfers in the field, or 16 in the field. One or two live guys. We've talked about Rahm already. We talked about Koepka. Anyone else that stands out to you as a great play?
Yeah, Neiman stands out as an outstanding course fit and a great current form. Now his ownership's a little bit higher. In a more contrarian realm, DJ would absolutely fit. It's a leap of faith with the way he's been playing recently, but I mean, he's still Dustin Johnson, so could he turn it on for a weekend at a course that fits his game? 100%, absolutely. And then the longest shot live guy that I like is Adrian Moronk. Again, long, straight, high ball hitter. He's not going to be owned at all. Not many people know about him, but very good European player who should be a good course fit.
There you go. So we got some chalk. We got some lower owned under the radar guys. And we got the lowest owned guy, Adrian Maronk. Speaking of Euro guys, there are quite a few in this event. And if you watch the DP World Tour, you'll know these names. But any of these guys, Nero, and none of them are really that expensive. Any of these guys stand out to you? I'm looking at guys like, well, we've had guys who come over and had success, like Matthew Pavon, right? Very good example. Came over and won a
Yep.
PGA event. But we have a few other guys even lower down the salary board. Who sticks out to you from the Euro Tour?
I've mentioned a few of them already, but yeah, if we're bottom hunting in the Euros, which is a place I like to hang out, Nikolai Højgaard and his brother Rasmus would both make sense. Nikolai makes more sense because he's played more in the U.S. He's generally been a little bit better than Rasmus, but I know when they first came on the scene, most people generally thought that Rasmus was the one with the higher ceiling than Nikolai had. So, they both make a lot of sense to me. I already mentioned Moronk, but he's another one that would fit in that same category of kind of like forgotten European players. And then you could make a very small case for someone like Thorbjorn Olesen, who's been playing on the PGA Tour this year, has been making cuts, hasn't been having a lot of high finishes. Someone who has played well in majors before, and is a good enough course fit, especially at sub 1% or 2%, whatever his ownership will end up being. I like those other ones more, but you can at least make a case for Thorbjorn.
Fair enough. And finally, favorite low owned plays, we will cap it at 5% projected ownership. We've mentioned projected ownership a lot on this show. If you don't have a source for projected ownership, if you're building lineups without projected ownership, you're basically drawing dead in PGA DFS. You can check out our Occupy model or our lineup builder. We update and modify our projected ownership all the way up to lock. Modify it 6 or 8 times per week. We'll have the final update probably later tonight. But who else that we haven't talked about yet, Nero, fits the bill as someone you're trying to sneak into your player pool?
Yeah, I think in the same vein of what we talked about, someone like Will Zalatoris just sticks out like a sore thumb, right? He's going to be sub 5%. The model has him right now projected for 3%. Yes, 2 weeks ago he took the tournament off because he experienced some back tightness. Yes, last week he played terrible at the Wells Fargo. He said it wasn't. He said today in his presser it wasn't related to his back. He just played poorly. But again, a long iron ball striking robot. Like, would that not have Zalatoris' picture next to it in a dictionary somewhere? So, yeah, it's a leap of faith. Well, guess what? If it wasn't a leap of faith, he'd be 23%
Right.
owned instead of 3% owned. So that's the point. Like, but in a week like this, I would rather pay up for the uncertainty because of the leverage that it provides me in a tournament, in a DFS tournament. Again, I'm not talking about betting golf. I'm not talking about pools with my buddies or any of that kind of stuff. I'm strictly talking about DFS. I would rather have lineups that include players like Zalatoris, like John Rahm, than lineups without those guys. Rather than saying having a 3% player that's $5,700, give me a 3% owned player who I know can have a chance to win the event, and then I can figure out the rest of it around them.
That's very true. And that's a great way to close out the show. So, for final thoughts, if you made it this far, one, we appreciate it. Drop a like on the video. That's the quickest way to show your support for the channel. If you want to see future major videos, make sure you drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know that you appreciate the video. You want to see these in the future. That's the best way to let us know. Two, a favor for us, it's mutually beneficial. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. It is free to do so here on YouTube. Just click that subscribe button. That'll let you know whenever any DFS video that we post. We have best ball contests, MMA, PGA during major weeks, baseball, basketball, everything you need. So make sure you're subscribed here on YouTube. It's free to do so, and it'll get you notified whenever our videos are dropped. And we know that a vast majority are only going to watch free content. You're not going to pay for anything. That's great. We appreciate you nonetheless. However, if you're the type of person that wants that extra edge, you need every piece of information you can to build your lineups for the PGA Championship. Check out OccupyFantasy.com, where we have our model, our PGA daily plug, and our lineup builder. That all the rules Nero has been talking about, you can implement them into the builder and automatically generate lineups using our model values. It's the best way to build PGA DFS lineups. Nero, final thoughts here. I'll put you on the spot. Who wins the PGA Championship?
And based on what I said, I have to take Rom in the upset. I prefer Rom when no one is talking about him, and literally no one is talking about John Rom this week. So I think it's a great week for him to step out of the shadows and grab his win.
John Rahm, it's now your time to get back in the win column. So, for final thoughts, check out the Wednesday update and the daily plug for the final trifecta plays. Check out our Discord server, and that's also where you can chat with us, Niromada and me, and other members of the community. OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. So for Nero, I am Brian. We appreciate you listening. As always, good luck and enjoy the PGA Championship.